Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things. First, I want to say congratulations to the chairman on his ascension to the chairmanship of the committee. I missed the organizing meeting this morning, and so I want to make sure.
Missed you, brother.
Well, I appreciate that. I will be here for all the future meetings. I also want to say thank you to the acting ranking member, my colleague from Texas, Ms. Escobar, for her leadership during, of course, a very difficult time for the country and for her community in El Paso, and we are all grateful for her service to the country, the caucus, and to her community that I have visited and that I look forward to visiting again. To the witnesses, I want to say thank you, Judge, for your testimony and for your service. Of course, Sheriff, thank you for your service and the service of your many deputies and all the law enforcement who are engaged in Herculean efforts in protecting our communities. Mr. Dunn, I want to tell you just that our hearts and our thoughts and our prayers are with you. My wife and I are expecting our second child later this year, a son, and it breaks my heart to hear your story, and very much want you to know that I think across both sides of the aisle here, everyone expresses our deepest condolences to you and to your family. Sheriff, I think I just want to dig in a little bit on your testimony. I reviewed the written testimony that was submitted by all the witnesses, and a lot of you had written testimony, but then also a memo that was appended, essentially an appendix to your testimony.
Correct.
And I reviewed that appendix, and you suggest a lot of proposals, of ideas, of programs that I gather you believe would help us ameliorate, the emergency that's happening on our southern border. In digging through some of these, just for example, you list enhanced funding for regional communication and interoperability with local and law enforcement. I think that's something that all members of Congress would support. Democrats, Republicans, that's a common sense step that we ought to be funding. You list here continued funding and support for the Stone Garden program. And I don't know if you can talk a little bit about what the Stone Garden program is. I'm certainly aware of it. Some of my colleagues might not be. I know my colleagues from Texas are, but if you care to talk a little bit about that program, but a DHS program that you would like to see continued support for.
It's one of the only programs, Congressman, where Stone Garden actually brings partnership between CBP and sheriffs and local law enforcement, to include our state law enforcement. It's a program that sheriffs nationally and beyond have supported. It pays our overtime to include EREs, employer-related expenses, to work side by side with Border Patrol. It's a great program.
So here's why I bring that up. The Stone Garden program has been in existence for quite some time.
Yes.
Back during the administration of President Obama, it was at about $50 million, given the fiscal year. Right now, we're funding it at $90 million for the fiscal year 2023 budget that the president has submitted. That's the exact same number that former President Trump submitted during the course of his presidency. And I guess why I offer that is because to me, these aren't partisan or, proposals that at the end of the day are focused on blaming one side or the other. This is an example of something that President Biden has continued to do to support, and I presume you support that he's continued funding for the Stone. Similarly, you put here one of the items in terms of a proposal that you'd like to implement is to hire more immigration and asylum hearing officers for all POEs, or Port of Entries, I presume that acronym. And I'm sure you're already aware of this, that on January 5th, so a few weeks ago, the president announced that there would be an increase of officers at the border to help process migrants. That's in addition to the 25,000 officers. Obviously, we're waiting in terms of the president's budget to get the exact number, but I think that's something you support as well, I presume, in terms of adding more officers.
I do.
And the reason why I'm asking those questions, again, just to kind of land here at the end, is that from my perspective and from my constituents' perspectives in northern Colorado and in western Colorado, they are focused on solutions, trying to solve the problem. And you've outlined a couple of solutions here. And I'd love to be able to have a thoughtful conversation with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle about these different prescriptive proposals and get to a place where we can find consensus. But unfortunately, at least as I've gathered from the parts of the hearing that I've heard, it's a lot of heat from some of my colleagues, unfortunately, about blame and sort of characterizing the problem instead of solving the problem. So I'm hoping that we can get to that. And with that, I'd like to yield my remaining time to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Neguse. 2 quick points. The folks that are being processed by CBP who are seeking asylum, I want to remind my colleagues, seeking asylum is legal. So once they've been processed, they are legally in the country. Second thing, Mr. Roy stated that we called his bill unchristian. We did not. We are quoting his colleague from Texas in the Republican conference, Mr. Tony Gonzalez. He is the one who called Mr. Roy's bill unchristian. And then finally, I would like to ask my colleagues not to slander the U.S. Conference of Bishops, Catholic Charities, and the Catholic Church, as one of our Republican colleagues did just moments ago. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized. Mr. Nels.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here. And it is no secret, quite honestly, it's self-evident. We are facing the worst border crisis in the history of our great country. It's self-induced. It's a self-induced crisis. And it falls at the feet of Joe Biden and his border czar Kamala Harris, who have expressed very little interest in addressing our border crisis, evidenced by their unwillingness to place the American people first. And I would like to address Sheriff Daniels and thank you for almost your 4 decades of service in law enforcement. And Sheriff, in your written testimony, you highlight tragedies in your county related to illegal immigration. And I'm a former sheriff in Texas, big county, and I feel your pain. Sheriff, I feel your pain.
Thank you.
I also experienced a loss of life of innocent county residents, Americans, at the hands of Joe Biden's irresponsible border policies. It is very clear the individuals from around the globe that have been invited into our country by this administration do not have America's best interest at heart. I say this because they are willing to kill. Sheriff, you shared a personal tragedy in your written testimony of a citizen. It was Wanda, I believe. She was 65 years old, attending her birthday party, trying to go and celebrate her 65th birthday, ran by a car, high-speed chase, ran a red light, and it killed her. The smuggler had 3 illegal aliens inside that vehicle. It ended her life. And then I understand that shortly thereafter, her son ended up driving upon the scene. I can't imagine how he felt, what he felt when he saw that car with his mother inside that vehicle. But stories like this are often too common. They're common today. I want to show you this here. This is me here. This guy. His name is Mr. Zavala. He ran over and killed Miss Boo. Her last name was Boo, 81 years old. Ran her over, fled the scene, took off. We apprehend him. Our sheriff's office apprehended him a couple hours later. We start booking him into the county jail. We run him. This knucklehead has been deported 6 previous times. 6. I think the American people are going to say, how does a guy get deported more than once? He's been deported 6 previous times. And these are just a few stories that Sheriff Daniels and we are sick of telling these stories. We are sick of having to have families come into our offices and explain that their loved ones were killed by people that shouldn't be here in the first place. I'd like to turn my attention to Judge Santiago's testimony. Judge, your written testimony claims your center has assisted 26,829 asylum seekers, and I think it opened up in October 10th of 2022, correct?
That's correct.
So about 4 months, 26,000, fair enough. Data has shown that between the years of 2008 and 2019, just 14% of aliens who claimed credible fear were granted assignments. So that means 86% don't. So 14% of 26,829 is 3,756. Would you agree with that number? Okay, congratulations. Your center has assisted over 23,000 illegals that have been scattered throughout the country, coming into Houston, buses, right? Bus every day, scattered throughout the entire country. And 23,000 of those will never be able to have a legitimate asylum claim because only 14% of them do. And sir, that puts the American people at risk, and it puts the American people last. You stated there is no invasion of migrants in our community, nor are there hordes of undocumented immigrants committing crimes against citizens or causing havoc in your community. I'll say this. El Paso PD, February 25th, 2022, violent crimes on the rise in El Paso. The sergeant said we have seen a 27% increase in offenses involving weapons, stabbings, everything. Here's another one. El Paso cops arrest 2 migrants, an overwhelmed border city. That's your city, sir. People selling dope, doing all sorts of stuff. Illegals, Venezuelans running around in stolen police cars. Cops are having to chase them. Here, 2 days ago, we have here in the city of Houston, the enforcement removal operations had to remove a guy that was in Houston illegally. He goes out and commits an armed robbery in the city of Houston, right? We arrest him. Thank goodness we arrested him. We find out he's got a murder warrant out of Mexico. So we've got some problems here, sir, and I would like to ask you this question. Do you believe that these illegal migrants are coming into our communities, harming the American citizens? Thank you. Your answer is yes. And you may know that that Houston is right next to my district, and I will say this. My eyes are wide open. The American people's are wide open. I'd ask you to open yours. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Ms. Bush.
Thank you. To Mr. Dunn, my condolences. Very, very sorry for your tremendous loss. To Judge Samaniego, thank you very much for your testimony and for listening and enduring and for giving your testimony. St. Louis and I are here to recognize the humanity of all people, regardless of immigration status. You know, we are here in opposition to any racist agenda pursued by Republicans. And let's take a moment to reflect on this first month of Republican control of the House. The disastrous and embarrassing Speaker's vote that resulted in the selling of the gavel to a bunch of pro-coup members of Congress, the seating of insurrectionists, and someone who defrauded his way into Congress. That's where we are. And now this hearing, whose purpose, it seems, is to amplify the anti-immigrant hysteria and right-wing conspiracy theories. The Republican position on immigration is to inflict as much cruelty as possible on people fleeing suffering and persecution. As Democrats, we need to recognize this reality and refuse to be a part of it. That's why I strongly oppose the administration's expansion of Title 42 and the reinstatement of the asylum transit ban. These lawless and inhumane policies deny the right to asylum while failing to address any of the underlying structural problems of our immigration system. So, Judge Samaniego, I want to ask you, do you believe Title 42 is an effective or a humane immigration policy?
It is not. And I thank you for being practical, because I need to get back to this idea of detaining them until they're able to vet them. That's one of the most impractical things I've ever heard of. Right now, Border Patrol is shivering, thinking, how are we going to do that? Without the community being involved, we're pushing that on them, where they have 1,400 spaces, and we're going to detain them. And we talk about the humanity of the Border Patrol. Just think about what it would take to detain until we vet them. It'd be impossible. I remember growing up and we'd say, you know, how do you put 50 people in a Volkswagen, 25 in the front, 25 in the back? Mm-hmm. That's about as impractical as this idea of detaining them until you can let them go when you don't have the facility, you don't have the manpower, and it's those impractical solutions that confuse people. And so I tell you that we know we've been able to manage things, and we know that when there's issues in other parts of the border, it's because of the lack of organization, it's the lack of collaboration, it's a lack of a lot of different things. So when you have people running in to your country because you're not well organized and you're not using collaboration, we've had 2 or 3 incidents. We have 800 people out that we're not able to manage because of funding. There's communities that have had as many as 10,000 because they're not organized properly. So I can tell you our strategy works. And if people listen to it and we were able to share the ideas and how we've been successful, I can tell you that we minimize the problem incredibly minimize the problem for the federal government. And there should be some kind of appreciation for a community that is sensible about what's happening in El Paso, and we all know that we don't want it to happen to the rest of the nation. And all we hear is, you know, that I used the wrong word or that I said racist. I never said that. What I said is that using those narratives creates more racism in a community. I didn't say anything about the people involved in it. So I thank you for looking at practical reasons, and I'm appalled when somebody has an idea like detaining them as a solution, when that's the most impractical thing you could probably do. Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you for your work, and thank you for explaining that. As Democrats, we must refuse to adopt illegal and ineffective solutions to this complex, long-standing crisis. We must be better than what we're seeing coming from Republicans. Republicans want to talk about Biden's border crisis, but the reality is we have a broken immigration system because Republicans want us to. So they can hold these hearings to mask the fact that they have no affirmative agenda that actually helps people. So they can spew their lies about immigrants bringing fentanyl across the border while exploiting victims and refusing to support investments in public health and addiction treatment. So they can take out their anger and insecurities on the most vulnerable. History will not look kindly on those politicians. Thank you, and I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Hunt from Texas.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Really appreciate it. Mr. Dunn, thank you, sir, for being here. My condolences to you and your family. From the bottom of my heart, I am very sorry, and I hope we can do something to fix this issue of fentanyl in our country. Mr. Daniel, sir, thank you very much for your continued service. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much. Sir, Judge, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be here. I greatly appreciate everybody on this panel today. I think we've heard a lot of talk today about the 5 million people, illegal people that have entered this country, and that's a fact. There's just absolutely no getting around that. 5 million people have entered our country illegally. That's the equivalent to 7 congressional districts. Enough fentanyl has poured into our country to kill every American 5 times. I say that again, to kill every American 5 times. Sir, your son is one of those Americans. This is a fact. I'm from Houston. Houston is known for a lot of things. We're known for the world champion Astros, and we're also known as being the human trafficking capital of the entire world. That's not anything I am proud of. This is all happening at our southern border as we live and breathe every single day. Sir, Judge, I'm not criticizing what you're saying, and I've listened to you, and I can hear your heart and I understand where you are coming from. But you did say that there's no invasion here. And I'm somebody that likes to look at the definition of things before we actually can have this conversation. And according to Oxford, the definition of an invasion is an incursion by a large number of people or things into a place or sphere of activity. I say it again. An incursion by a large number of people, and I would say 5 million people constitutes a large number, or things, and I would say enough fentanyl to pour into our country to kill every American 5 times is a thing. I would consider that to be the direct definition of the word invasion. My colleague, Mr. Gooden, talked about race and using the word racism and racist, and I've been black for a long time, sir, so I get it. And I've been a minority in this country for a very long time. But this is actually not about race. This is actually an issue of public safety. And if I call this an invasion, sir, I'm not racist. I can assure you I'm not racist. What I can assure you is that I want to make sure that fentanyl doesn't indiscriminately kill any race, religion, color, or creed, because fentanyl doesn't care where you're from. Fentanyl doesn't care about race. Fentanyl kills indiscriminately. This gentleman right here works his tail off every single day to stop that from happening. Now, there's been a break in the dam, and that's pretty obvious, because a couple of years ago, of course, we had some problems, but it wasn't amplified to the level that we are seeing every single day. And the reason why we have to be careful with what we call and what we deem racist moving forward in the future is because we start to lose focus on what the actual problem is. This administration, the Democrat Party, unfortunately, uses race as a scapegoat for everything. And as somebody that wants to make sure that we do attack racist issues when they do occur, we can't be the boy who cried wolf and blame racism all the time. I am here to hold this administration accountable to understand that there are issues of race that need to be addressed. And sir, this ain't one of them. I applaud some of your actions in El Paso. It sounds like you're doing some great things. But I'm going to tell you, as being born and raised in Texas, living in Houston, we have a problem, and this problem has precipitated over the course of the past 2 years. That is a fact. I get working together. I get reaching across the aisle. But this morning, I can't believe that we had a 1-hour debate over whether or not we should sing the Pledge of Allegiance before we convene every day. 1 hour. That, to me, is antithetical to the point of this meeting today. I implore you all to be careful with using race because your son's no longer here. And I'm sorry. There's 100,000 sons and daughters that are no longer here because of fentanyl last year. This debate is very important, very spirited, but I implore this entire committee take a strong look at what's happened over the course of the past few years and to derive substantive solutions to this problem so that our youth can continue to have a future for this country. It ain't about race. We are all in this together. I yield back, Chairman. Thank you.